My wife and her boss decided to go away for the weekend. That too, after informing me.
Her boss threatens me that he will upload illegal material on my computer if I stop my wife from sleeping with him. I recorded evidence of his threats. Without knowing him, I let law decide their fate.
Imagine this: an entitled, wealthy man barges into your home, striding in like he owns the place, and insists, not politely, but with all the confidence of a spoiled child, that he is taking your wife away for the weekend. Not just that, he openly threatens you as though you are some minor obstacle in his perfect little world. Initially, my instinct was pure, unfiltered rage, the urge to confront him. To let loose with a few well-placed punches to his arrogant face burned through me. My hands itched, my teeth clenched, but I opted for a different approach. Anger is satisfying in fiction, dramatic in movies, but in real life it's messy. My strategy needed patience, calculation, and discipline. My mood wasn't exactly stellar that Thursday afternoon as I loaded my tools into my pickup truck. The day had been a nightmare from the start. The client I'd been working with for the past 3 weeks, a notoriously indecisive homeowner, had changed his mind again about the staircase project. Plans that I'd finalized just the day before were now obsolete. His latest request required undoing a significant portion of work I'd already completed. And worse, I had to coordinate with the architect and engineer to redraw structural plans to accommodate his whim. Each email, each call, each revision felt like a personal attack on my sanity. And yet, the silver lining or misfortune, depending on how you see it, was that the next day unexpectedly became a day off. I'm Ethan Crawford, 33. Owner and operator of a boutique woodworking shop specializing in high-end staircases. My clientele consists of wealthy homeowners, boutique hotels, restaurants, and offices willing to pay upwards of $30,000 for a custom masterpiece. I've spent over a decade mastering my craft, building staircases that aren't just functional, they're works of art. Lydia Bennett, my wife, 29, a rising star at Langford, Baker & Bennett, specializing in commercial and intellectual property law. We've been married 4 years. We don't have children yet, not out of choice, but because Lydia is fiercely career-driven, and I've learned long ago that her ambition is non-negotiable. Arriving home at exactly 5:10 p.m., I noticed her car in the driveway. Thursdays were usually her late nights, but here she was, unusual. Walking through the back door, my usual route from construction sites, I immediately noticed a slight drop in water pressure. Shower running upstairs, perhaps. That timing was odd. She normally showers either early in the morning or just before bed. After a quick change into more comfortable clothes, I made my way upstairs, curiosity mingling with unease. As suspected, Lydia had recently finished showering. She now stood in black fishnet stockings. A brand new black dress lay on the bed behind her, ready to be worn. "Hey, honey," I said cautiously, attempting casual. "Why are you home so early? Did I forget something? Do we have plans tonight?" My mind raced with questions, all urgent, none rational. Lydia met my gaze, a flicker of nervousness barely concealed behind her carefully composed expression. She sighed. "No, Ethan, you haven't forgotten anything. I'm going out tonight, and you're not." My brain paused, rewound. "Wait, what? I'm not going. What do you mean?" "It's Victor," she said, almost defiantly, as though rehearsing the lines she would deliver. "I'll be spending the weekend with him. I'll be back Sunday afternoon." Confusion, disbelief, anger collided inside me. "What on earth are you talking about? A business trip?" "A work engagement?" I asked, hoping for rationality, for an explanation that made sense in any conceivable universe. "No, Ethan, not a business trip." Her tone was flat, rehearsed. "Victor has a hotel suite reserved for us. This weekend is for him." "No, I will not. I cannot," I protested, the words catching somewhere between fury and heartbreak. "You're going to spend the weekend with another man? This is insane." Her expression turned cold, calculated. "Well, you'd better accept it. That's what Victor wants, and I advise you not to cross him." I inhaled slowly, fighting to keep my composure. "So you're telling me I should just accept this, swallow my feelings, watch you leave, and then expect you to be my wife afterward? Is that it?" "No, it's more than just this weekend," she said. "Victor wants it to happen from time to time, so yes, deal with it and keep quiet. Trust me, your life will be much simpler if you go along with it." Her words hung in the air, heavy, suffocating. I didn't argue further. Not yet. I watched her prepare for the evening, every movement meticulous, detached as if rehearsed. Meanwhile, I grabbed a beer from the fridge. and noticed a sleek black Mercedes pull up in front of the house. I knew who it was before she even called. "Ethan, that's Victor. Will you go answer the door?" Lydia yelled from upstairs. I punched in the code on the back door, making sure the alarm was armed, then slipped my cell phone into my pocket with recording mode active. I settled into the living room, sipping my beer, preparing mentally for the confrontation. Victor Langford. I'd known him since Lydia started at MBB 4 years ago. He exuded confidence and charm in public, but arrogance and contempt behind closed doors, particularly toward men who dared to claim they were partners in someone's life. Lydia descended the stairs, visibly nervous, opening the front door. Victor entered, his presence dominating the space, his posture that of a man who believed every room belonged to him. "Hey, buddy," he boomed, voice like a school principal scolding a child. "I hear you've got a problem with Lydia spending the weekend with me." My fists clenched. "Get out of my house, or I call the cops." He laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. Lydia smirked beside him. "And what do you think the cops will do?" he mocked. Then he noticed the phone tucked into my shirt, his face twisted in frustration. He reached for it. "Hey, you can't." "Locked," I said flatly, sipping my beer. "Password protected, but feel free to try. That's your issue now, not mine." The audacity, the sense of entitlement, the complete lack of respect, it was almost cinematic. And I realized in that moment I didn't need to hit him, shout, or escalate. I had patience, planning, leverage. Let him make the first mistakes, let him stumble on his own hubris. Because some people, arrogant, entitled, reckless, are far more destructive to themselves than anything you could do to them, and all I needed to do was document it. He hurled the phone to the floor. It struck the hard surface with a dull, crushing sound that echoed through the room. The impact felt deliberate, symbolic, an attempt to assert dominance, to remind me exactly who he believed was in control. "Listen to me, you clever little prick," he said coldly. "Your wife will be spending this weekend with me, whether you like it or not. Your opinion doesn't matter in this situation. Clear?" His voice dripped with menace. Each word sharpened to intimidate. He leaned closer, lowering his tone as if sharing a secret meant only for me. "And if you dare interfere," he continued, "there will be consequences. Your life will become a living hell, nothing compared to what's waiting for you if you don't comply. So stay quiet this weekend. Don't cause trouble. If I hear that you've upset Lydia, mentioned divorce, or even tried to contact your wife, you'll regret it." There was no room for negotiation in his warning. No ambiguity. He wasn't bluffing, at least he wanted me to believe he wasn't. I listened to his threats carefully, forcing myself to maintain a facade of ignorance and confusion. Panic wouldn't help me here. I needed him to believe I was powerless, uninformed, afraid. "I've never been involved in money laundering," I said mechanically, "and I've never had any connection to illegal materials involving children." The words felt stiff, rehearsed. But I hoped they would deflect his accusations. He sneered. "That can be easily arranged," he replied without hesitation. "Uploading material to your computer is a simple task. I possess content that could destroy your reputation overnight." His tone was calm, almost bored, which made the threat infinitely more disturbing. Something inside me snapped, not outwardly but internally. I decided to push back. Cautiously, "Illegal material involving children is illegal," I said. "If you upload something like that to my computer, doesn't that mean you're already in possession of it?" For a brief moment, I thought I'd caught him in a logical trap. But he dismissed my concern with chilling confidence. "That's the difference between you and me," he said smoothly. "Some things that are illegal for people like you are perfectly acceptable for people like me. I have power. I have connections." His arrogance was staggering. He continued outlining his conditions, issuing warnings not to seek revenge, not to involve lawyers, not to interfere with his personal affairs. He even made a degrading remark about my intimacy with Lydia, casual, dismissive, designed to humiliate me. I struggled to process the surreal situation unfolding in my own home. My emotions swung violently between rage and disbelief. A part of me wanted to lunge across the room, consequences be damned, but another part, colder, sharper, was already calculating. Amid the chaos, a small glimmer of gratitude surfaced. Months earlier, after a minor break-in, I had invested heavily in security, comprehensive surveillance, motion sensors, audio recording. An alarm system that monitored every corner of the house. Unknown to him, everything was being recorded. Every threat, every admission, every smug declaration of power. The phone he had thrown to the floor was nothing more than a decoy. A calculated sacrifice. It ensured he believed he'd neutralized my ability to communicate, leaving him unaware of just how exposed he truly was. When he and Lydia finally left, the weight of what had just happened settled heavily on my chest. I stood alone in the silence, my hands trembling slightly, yet beneath the shock and indignation was an undeniable sense of relief. I had evidence, clear, irrefutable, proof of coercion, threats, and manipulation. If I chose to pursue divorce or legal action, I now held a powerful weapon. The shattered phone on the floor wasn't my personal device, it was my business phone. After working with increasingly wealthy clients, I'd learned a valuable lesson early on. Giving them unrestricted access to your personal number meant being available around the clock. Calls at midnight, messages during dinner, emergencies that weren't emergencies at all. So I maintained a dedicated business phone, one I could shut off at the end of the day, knowing I'd respond to messages the following morning. It preserved my sanity. At least I wasn't cut off from the world. I picked up my personal phone and called my business lawyer and my closest friend, Ryan. 10 years ago, Ryan Rogers had married my elder sister, Emma. Their marriage was happy, effortless, the kind everyone quietly envied. 4 years later, tragedy struck. Emma drowned during a trip to Greece with friends. The loss shattered us all, but Ryan remained part of our family, not out of obligation, but because love doesn't evaporate with death. He earned our respect all over again through his resilience and loyalty. 3 years after Emma's passing, Ryan found love again in Charlotte. They married after a year of dating. Lydia and I were honored guests at their wedding. To this day, Ryan and Charlotte feel less like in-laws and more like siblings to me. When I explained the situation, the threats, Langford's behavior, Lydia's weekend away, Ryan didn't hesitate. He told me to stay inside. Avoid contacting anyone else, turn off all unnecessary communication devices. We'll be there in an hour, he said calmly. We'll bring dinner. That reassurance grounded me. As I waited, reflecting on the past hour, a painful realization surfaced. Lydia hadn't been manipulated by force alone. She had been drawn to Langford's power and charisma. I had underestimated how intoxicating that allure could be. Never had I imagined she would discard what we built for someone like him. It was a brutal awakening, one that exposed the fragility of a bond I thought was unbreakable. My journey with Lydia had begun 5 years earlier. At a birthday party for a friend of a friend. I barely knew anyone there. She was the sister of the birthday boy, an army officer stationed in Afghanistan. We talked. Then we talked more. Within a week, we were dating. A year later, we were married. At the time, I was still employed by Jacob Miller, founder of the small company where I worked. Jacob was a master woodworker, widely respected in our local area. His craftsmanship was exceptional, but his accounting and management skills were lacking. While I was still in college, he hired me part-time to handle bookkeeping. A few months later, he landed 3 large contracts that stretched his capacity. He asked for help in the field. At first, I ran errands, carried supplies, assisted with large materials, but I learned quickly. After the initial curve, I was handling simpler tasks independently, contributing meaningfully to larger projects. Despite pursuing an accounting degree, I discovered a deep satisfaction in hands-on work. I took on an apprenticeship, earned certification, became Jacob's associate. When he retired, my parents supported me financially so I could buy out his share over 2 years. Though Langford's lawyers dismissed me as an uneducated shop worker, I was unfazed. My company thrived, focusing on fewer, higher-value projects. I hired 2 assistants. My net income quietly surpassed that of many professionals Lydia admired. Ironically, even my wife didn't know how successful I had become. My thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Ryan and Charlotte arrived with Chinese takeout and beer. "Are you okay, Ethan?" Charlotte asked, pulling me into a warm, grounding hug. For the first time that night, I felt like I might be. I stared at Ryan for a long moment, still trying to reconcile the man sitting across from me with the calm, measured voice offering reassurance. "I can't believe Lydia did that to you," he finally said, shaking his head in disbelief as he pulled me into a firm, supportive hug. "This is so unlike her." I let out a slow breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The truth was, I wasn't sure anymore what was or wasn't like her. People reveal themselves in layers, and sometimes the ugliest parts stay hidden until the moment they do the most damage. "Don't worry, buddy," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. "We'll sort this out. Let's eat first, then I'll show you the recording." Dinner passed in a strange haze. The food tasted fine, but I barely registered it. My mind kept replaying Lydia's words, Victor's smug voice, the casual cruelty in the way he spoke, as if my home, my marriage, and my life were merely inconveniences to be brushed aside. When the plates were finally cleared, I retrieved my laptop and opened the encrypted folder containing the recordings from both the camera system and the phone's microphone. The audio was painfully clear. Ryan leaned forward as the recording played, his jaw tightening with every sentence Victor uttered. When it ended, silence filled the room. "I can't believe what I just heard," Ryan finally said, rubbing his temples. "That man is unreal, arrogant," I offered dryly. "No," Ryan replied, looking at me sharply, "downright foolish. This guy is what, 39, maybe early 40s? That means he's had at least 15 years of legal practice. He's not some fresh graduate who doesn't know better, and yet he's so full of himself it never even crosses his mind that sometimes the smartest move is to shut up." I gave a humorless half-smile. "Confidence bordering on stupidity. Exactly, and your move making him think the recording stopped after he smashed your phone?" Ryan shook his head in admiration. "Brilliant, he took the bait completely. Once he believed there was no evidence, he spilled everything. Threats, intent, motive, that's gold." I hesitated, a knot forming in my stomach. "But can I even use it? It was recorded without his consent." Ryan didn't hesitate. "Yes, Ethan, this is your home. You are legally allowed to record anything that happens inside it, especially when you're present. You didn't plant a hidden device in his office or intercept a private call. You documented a confrontation in your own living room." I exhaled in relief. "So I'm safe." Ryan held up a hand. "Careful, that's not what I'm saying. We're on solid ground, but this is still dangerous territory." He leaned back, his expression turning grave. "I did some digging on the way here. Hunter drove, so I had time to research. Victor Langford isn't just another lawyer throwing his weight around. He's the son of Colin Langford, the founder of Langford, Baker & Bennett." I nodded slowly. "I know the name. What you might not know," Ryan continued, "is that Colin Langford built his career less on brilliance and more on connections. He wasn't exceptional in court, but nearly every judge in this county was either his college roommate, fraternity brother, or golfing buddy. That kind of network wins cases regardless of merit." A chill ran down my spine. "And Victor?" I asked. "Following the same path," Ryan said grimly. "Same arrogance, same protection. If he files a civil case, especially anything involving reputation or defamation, we'd be fighting uphill. Judges like him, they know him, they trust his family name. So no matter what I do, I lose?" I asked quietly. Ryan shook his head. "Not necessarily. It won't be easy, but it's far from impossible. The key is leverage, evidence strong enough that no one can quietly sweep it under the rug." I straightened. "Then what's the angle?" Ryan met my eyes. "Criminal court," I blinked. "You think we can push it that far?" "If he crosses the line," Ryan said firmly, "and based on what he threatened, he just might." Before I could respond, a knock echoed through the house. I turned toward the door and saw a petite brunette standing on the porch, posture professional, expression alert. "Hello, Mr. Crawford," she said politely when I opened the door. "Hi, Grace, come in," Ryan called from behind me. He stood as she entered. "Ethan, this is Grace Moore. She's a computer forensics specialist with the private investigative firm we work with. I reached out after our call earlier." Grace gave a small nod. "Nice to meet you." That night, we walked her through everything. She listened carefully, replaying the recording several times, especially the part where Victor explicitly threatened to plant illegal material on my computer. When she finished, she folded her hands calmly. "All right, there are two likely scenarios." She pulled a small gray device from her bag and placed it on the table. "First," she continued, "they may attempt physical access, daytime. Possibly using your wife or someone she trusts. They'd sit at your computer, backdate files, and upload content to make it appear as though it existed before Victor's visit. If they do that, your security cameras will capture everything as long as they're actively recording." I nodded. "The second option is remote access," Grace said. "That's more subtle and more likely. This module installs upstream of your modem. It logs all inbound and outbound traffic, every attempt to access your router, every file transfer, every IP address." She met my gaze. "If they try anything, we'll see it." "What do I need to do?" I asked. "Transfer all personal and sensitive data to a flash drive," she replied. "Then wipe the computer completely. I'll help to make sure nothing hidden remains. The goal is to leave them nothing to manipulate." Ryan leaned in. Ethan, right now the recording is evidence, but not enough. Blackmail alone doesn't always sway courts, especially with someone like Langford. But if he uploads illegal material and then reports you to the police, Grace finished the sentence. We'll have proof that it happened while you were away after a recorded threat with documented digital fingerprints. That puts this squarely in criminal territory. I swallowed hard. That's twisted. Yes, Grace said evenly, but so is he. Ryan added, one more thing, don't use your computer for the next few days. If police inspect it, a lack of post-upload activity strengthens your defense, and disconnect your phone from home Wi-Fi entirely. We don't want them pivoting to another device. I nodded slowly, the weight of it all settling in. This wasn't just about saving myself anymore. This was about making sure a man like Victor Langford finally faced consequences. Grace finished installing the surveillance module with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this 100 times before. She moved through my home like it was a controlled environment, not a personal space filled with tension and unresolved anger. Every step was deliberate. Every action had a purpose. One last thing, she said, closing her laptop and sliding it back into her bag. I've wiped all sensitive information from both your computer and your phone, company documents, personal records, anything that could be misused. The module will forward us copies of every access request in real time. If someone even tries to get in, we'll know. She looked between Ryan and me, her expression professional but not unkind. I'll reach out the moment we have something actionable. Until then, best of luck, gentlemen. With that, Grace left, the door clicking shut behind her. The house felt quieter afterward, heavier somehow, like the walls themselves were absorbing what had just happened. All right, Ryan said, exhaling as he loosened his tie. Let's move on to something more practical. He studied me carefully before asking the question. Ethan, do you want to initiate the divorce process now, or would you rather wait until Lydia gets back and see if there's any chance of resolving this? No, I said immediately. There wasn't even a pause for thought. I want the divorce started as soon as possible. Ryan raised an eyebrow but didn't interrupt. I can't stay married to someone who's that easily influenced, I continued, my voice steady despite the anger simmering underneath. Someone who can be corrupted so quickly by men who claim power just because they've learned how to abuse it. I'm done. All right, Ryan said, nodding. Then I'll contact Evelyn Thomas tomorrow. She's the best family law specialist in my office, fair, sharp, and efficient. I'll have her reach out to you directly. You'll like her. We spent the next hour going over logistics. I gave Ryan full access to my recording system, real-time feeds, cloud backups, everything. By the time Charlotte and Ryan left around 10 that night, I was mentally drained in a way sleep couldn't immediately fix. I took a melatonin, lay down, and was unconscious within 30 minutes. At 8:30 the next morning, my phone rang. Ethan, this is Evelyn Thomas. Her voice was calm, confident, the voice of someone who handled crises for a living. She asked me to come into her office by noon. When I arrived, she greeted me with genuine sympathy, having already spoken at length with Ryan about the situation. I'm sorry you're going through this, she said, folding her hands neatly on the desk. But let's talk facts. Once we remove emotion, things become much clearer. She explained that since I'd purchased the house before I even met Lydia and her name was never added to the deed, the property remained entirely mine. No children meant fewer complications. From a legal standpoint, the divorce would be relatively straightforward. What about my company? I asked. Could I be forced to sell it or split the proceeds? Ryan answered before she could. No, the marriage contract is explicit. The company is yours alone. She has zero claim to it. Evelyn nodded. They might try to challenge it, but legally there's no footing. I've reviewed everything. By 1:45 p.m., the meeting was over. Evelyn assured me she'd handle the filings and that Lydia would be served divorce papers at her office on Monday. For the first time in days, I felt a thin thread of control return. I replaced my destroyed phone that afternoon. I spent the weekend doing things that felt strangely normal: yard work, basic errands, catching up on a TV series I'd neglected. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but the reality of what was happening hadn't fully settled yet. Sunday night loomed over me. I debated whether I should take the guest room or assign it to Lydia when she returned. In the end, the decision was simple. This was my house. She was the one who walked out. I moved all her belongings into the guest room, installed a lock on my bedroom door, kept the key in my pocket. When I heard her car pull into the driveway that evening, I activated the surveillance system. Through the monitor, I watched Lydia lean across the center console and engage in a long, intimate kiss with her boss before stepping out of the car. She waved as he drove off. I sat on the couch with a book in my hands, pretending to read when she walked in. "How was your weekend?" she asked, her voice tight with forced composure. "Fine," I said without looking up. She scoffed. "Continue sulking. Victor said you'd act like this. He thinks you lack the intelligence to understand my needs or the maturity to accept your shortcomings." She turned and walked upstairs. I counted silently. 1, 2, 3. "Ethan Crawford," she snapped, returning. "Did you seriously put a lock on our bedroom?" "My bedroom," I corrected calmly. "Your things are in the guest room. You'll be staying there until you find an apartment." Her face flushed. "What the hell?" "Wait until I tell Victor about this. This wasn't part of the agreement." "Agreement?" I stood. "I didn't agree to any of your arrangements. Either stay in the guest room or leave." "Maybe Victor's wife can make space for you." She stormed upstairs and slammed the door. I followed, stopping outside the guest room. "Speaking of agreements," I said through the door, "what exactly was in this for me?" Silence. I went back downstairs. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "So this is what I hear. You won't let Lydia into her own room?" I thought I explained things clearly. Even someone like you should understand. "Tonight, I'll overlook your childish behavior. Tomorrow, you'll cook Lydia her favorite dinner and apologize. Behave for the rest of the week, and I'll allow her to be intimate with you next weekend. Fail to comply and you'll discover my threats are real." I stared at the screen, stunned, heartless, delusional, arrogant beyond belief. I didn't respond. Instead, I took screenshots and sent them straight to Ryan. 4 minutes later, his reply came through. "Incredible. This guy thinks he's untouchable. First-rate idiot. Don't reply. Let him talk." Langford sent a few more messages. I ignored every one. Eventually, the silence returned. I locked my bedroom door that night, left the surveillance system running, and slept without interruption. The next morning, after Lydia left, I got up, made myself breakfast, and downloaded the overnight recordings. No drama. No confrontation, just evidence and peace beginning to take shape. Lydia hadn't emerged from the guest room until that morning. She had used the guest bathroom for a shower, moving with the efficiency of someone who had already packed a weekend's worth of intentions into a single morning. She left without touching breakfast, not that I expected her to linger. The air between us had been thick with weeks of tension, and this weekend had done nothing to smooth it. Surprisingly, she hadn't attempted to access my computer, not even once, despite my expectation that she, or someone she trusted, might try to interfere with my systems. A ping from my phone drew my attention. A text from Evelyn Thomas. "Hi Ethan, just confirming that the divorce papers will be served at 10 o'clock this morning." I immediately relayed the message to Ryan. "Noted, we'll be ready." "Try to have as good a day as possible under the circumstances," he replied. Before heading to the shop, I performed my usual ritual, ensuring my home security and surveillance system was active, recording, and set to send an instant alert to my phone if triggered. Control was still mine. That comforted me, however slightly, against the unpredictability Lydia and her allies had been introducing into my life. I had a 12 p.m. meeting with the architect to finalize modifications for my current staircase project. So I kept myself occupied with smaller tasks around the shop. Everything from sanding down new balusters to checking measurements provided a distraction from the simmering anticipation of the divorce papers being served. I fully expected a call from Lydia shortly afterward, a flurry of questions, excuses, or pleas, but nothing came. The silence felt deliberate. By 11:40 a.m., the absence of contact weighed heavier. I sent a quick message to Ryan, no word from Lydia yet. Surprising, considering what just happened. "This likely means she's already spoken with Langford," Ryan responded, his tone cautious. "They might be scheming already. Stay ready." "I'll call Grace. Keep your phone nearby." The meeting with the architect proceeded smoothly, surprisingly so. Perhaps he sensed my need for focus. Or maybe the quiet before the storm was helping me center my thoughts. I spent the rest of the afternoon tidying the shop, performing maintenance on tools, and ensuring everything was in order, a mental rehearsal for control in a life that had increasingly been disrupted by Lydia's choices. Then, as dusk approached, my phone buzzed with an alert from Ryan. "The show is in motion." I quickly accessed my home system and watched the live feed with a tightening in my chest. Lydia had arrived, accompanied by an unfamiliar man whose presence immediately set off alarms in my mind. Together, they proceeded to the home office and activated my computer. They barely spoke. The man spent several minutes deciphering my password before inserting a flash drive and engaging in activities that, while I couldn't fully identify in real time, were undeniably suspicious. I captured clear images of his face through the surveillance cameras. Meanwhile, Lydia moved to the guest room, stuffing her belongings into garbage bags. Her suitcases, apparently stored in the master bedroom closet, followed. After about 15 minutes, the man finished his work, shut down the computer, and informed Lydia of his departure. She completed packing and left the premises. The calm after their exit was almost eerie. The house felt emptier than it had in weeks. Ryan contacted me immediately after the recording ceased. "All right, Ethan, head home and act normal. I suspect they'll involve the police tonight or tomorrow. Be prepared for an inspector's visit. Search warrants take a few hours, so anticipate them coming tomorrow." "Could I get arrested?" I asked. "It's a possibility," Ryan admitted. "If it happens, maintain silence, don't answer questions." "I've already contacted Oliver Wilson, a reliable criminal defense lawyer. I've shared all the evidence, including the recordings. He assures me this will be the easiest case of the year for him." I provided Ryan with the code to control my alarm system and ensure all recordings continued, even if I was detained. We discussed contingencies for some time, covering everything from potential evidence seizures to chain of custody procedures. Once the conversation concluded, I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my chest as I drove home, the weight of the day pressing against my spine. The evening passed without incident. No police, no calls from Lydia, no threatening messages from Langford. I made myself a simple sandwich and watched TV, though the tension never fully left me. I considered informing my parents but decided to wait. Trying to explain a home surveillance system, cloud storage, and ongoing criminal threats seemed like an invitation to panic rather than assistance. Some battles had to be fought alone. The following day, I was at the shop when another notification pinged on my phone: "Intruder detected in my house." My pulse quickened, but I followed procedure calmly. I immediately messaged Ryan and accessed my system remotely. Through the monitor, I saw that the police had entered my home and were attempting to deactivate the alarm. The system had partially shut down their access, but communication was limited. Ryan confirmed he was watching the live feed and forwarded images to Oliver Wilson. Approximately an hour and a half later, 2 officers arrived at my shop and placed me under arrest. I was handcuffed, escorted to a police car, and transported to the station. The officers quickly informed me of my rights and began questioning, which I declined to answer. Upon arrival at the station, they confiscated my cell phone and wallet and placed me in a holding cell with 5 other individuals. Interaction was minimal. The other detainees were absorbed in their own worlds, staring at the floor tiles or quietly muttering to themselves. After roughly 2.5 hours, a guard came for me, escorting me to a meeting room. "What the heck?" I exclaimed, surprised. "I never disclosed who my lawyer is." The guard said nothing, leaving me alone in the room. 15 minutes later, the door opened and Langford strode in triumphant with a grin as wide as the Golden Gate Bridge. He didn't sit idly. He took the center of the room like it was his stage. I remained silent, holding his gaze. He let the moment linger, establishing dominance before finally speaking. "Now do you understand the gravity of the situation?" he asked. I didn't respond. "I asked you a question, Crawford." "Answer me, you insignificant bug," he barked. Again, I remained silent. "It will be your word against mine, Crawford, a carpenter's word versus one of the most prominent lawyers in the city. Guess the outcome?" He stood, adjusted his tie, and with a smug, self-satisfied look, added, "All right, it appears you need time to reflect. Let's reconvene tomorrow morning. Maybe spending a night in the communal cell with your new friends will help you gain clarity." He exited, leaving me alone in the room. The holding cell now contained 4 others, the silence between us almost tangible. Later that afternoon, another escort appeared. I was returned to the same meeting room where a tall, stern-looking man waited. "Don't mess with me," he warned as I entered. "Good afternoon, Ethan. Pleasure to meet you. I'm Oliver Wilson." "Call me Oliver," he introduced himself firmly but without malice. Ryan had contacted him earlier, explaining the circumstances. Oliver had been briefed on the full situation, from Lydia's actions to Langford's manipulations. I recounted every detail: the initial intrusion, the recordings, the threats, even the attempted sabotage of my systems. His jaw dropped slightly as I spoke, though he maintained professional composure. "All right," he said finally. You'll appear before a judge tomorrow morning. Expect a procedural hearing, but don't worry, Ryan will manage it. It's going to be a tough night, but stay strong. Both Ryan and I are here to support you. Meanwhile, continue refusing to answer any questions from the police or Langford. I've officially taken on your case, and I will ensure Langford can't interfere again. The reassurance, though tempered by the gravity of the situation, gave me a measure of calm I hadn't felt in days. For the first time since Lydia's departure and Langford's intrusion, I felt a faint sense of control returning, fragile but undeniable. The following day, I found myself sitting across from a judge, charged with possessing illegal materials involving children. I maintained my plea of not guilty, keeping my composure despite the surreal, almost absurd weight of the situation. The courtroom was quiet, sterile, and tense, the kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes every breath feel conspicuous. After a brief procedural hearing, bail was set at $17,000 and I was released later that afternoon. While I wasn't allowed to leave the city limits or contact my soon-to-be ex-wife, Victor Langford, or anyone connected to their office, I was permitted to continue working at my shop. My cell phone and wallet were returned to me, and Oliver took me for a late lunch to discuss next steps. I had refrained from divulging too much at the police station the day before, mindful of confidentiality. But now, sitting across from Oliver and savoring the brief reprieve of a normal meal, I could finally share and process the details I had uncovered about Victor Langford. "Here's something that might reassure you," Oliver began, leaning back slightly, steepling his fingers. "First, the process of obtaining a search warrant takes hours. Only after they secure that can they review any material and initiate an arrest. In your case, you were brought in before the police even completed the search of your home." I nodded, silently acknowledging the layers of legal maneuvering I had barely comprehended until now. "Second," he continued, "despite the restrictions preventing you from contacting me or Ryan, Langford had no legal access to you. He couldn't see or manipulate the situation in person. The circumstances strongly suggest the entire scenario was orchestrated, illegal beyond question." I frowned, a shiver running down my spine. "Ryan mentioned Langford has influence over several judges," I said cautiously. "Not all of them," Oliver replied with a knowing wink. "You can't build that many friendships without also making a few enemies along the way." "I have no idea what I'll find at home," I muttered, worry curling around my chest like a tightening fist. "I hope my wife and her conniving partner haven't taken everything." "Don't worry about that," Oliver reassured me. "Ryan went straight to your home after the police left, rearmed the system, and set it to record again. No one showed up. Your possessions are intact." Relieved, I returned to the shop to retrieve my car, taking a moment to breathe deeply and center myself before heading home. The architect had already left a message confirming that the updated plan for my staircase had been approved by the client, a small victory amid chaos. Finally, a sense of purpose outside the relentless tension with Lydia and Langford. When I arrived home, the scene was predictably chaotic. Every corner of the house had been searched. Drawers, closets, even inconspicuous shelves bore signs of intrusion, yet the evidence they sought anything incriminating was non-existent. As I tidied up the disarray, I couldn't help the tears that sprang unbidden to my eyes. Just a week ago, I had been content, even happy, secure in what I believed was a solid marriage. Now I faced suspicion, betrayal, and a future rendered uncertain. I let myself cry quietly, mourning not just my relationship, but the loss of the life I thought I had built. At least I reminded myself there were no reporters poking around. Even the media, with all their frenzy for scandal, had more pressing crises to cover, like a multi-billion-dollar discrepancy in public finances. No one cared about Ethan Crawford, carpenter, yet. By the end of the week, Oliver finally reached out with a revelation that lifted a considerable weight off my shoulders. All charges against me had been dropped. It seemed the inspector assigned to my case, a formidable individual with a particular sensitivity to blackmail, was not one to be trifled with. Unmoved by Langford's network or attempts at influence, the inspector had ensured the filing of charges against Langford himself, including blackmail, evidence fabrication, and possession of illegal materials involving children. Lydia, too, would face accusations of conspiracy tied to these crimes. Shortly after, Ryan called, inviting me to dinner that evening. On my way to his house, my family law attorney, Evelyn Thomas, contacted me. Ethan, Lydia's lawyer called me this afternoon. She's ready to sign the divorce papers without alterations, but there's one condition. She insists on a private meeting with you, approximately 90 minutes. She suggested it could take place at our office. I froze for a moment. Seeing Lydia was the last thing I wanted, but I reasoned the meeting might expedite the divorce proceedings, a necessary inconvenience. Proceed, I told Evelyn. I'll meet her. The evening with Ryan and Charlotte was a welcome respite, the first moment of real peace I had experienced in 3 weeks. Charlotte had prepared a delicious meal of coconut shrimp with jasmine rice, and for a brief while I let myself forget the chaos. I focused instead on the comforting rhythm of conversation, laughter, and well-cooked food. The meeting with Lydia was scheduled for the following Wednesday. Despite being the victim in this ill-conceived and manipulative plot, I felt an unshakable nervousness as the day approached. Upon arrival at Evelyn's office, she cautioned me, "Ethan, I'm unsure of her intentions. Keep in mind there are pending criminal accusations against her. Avoid giving her any ammunition. Do not say anything that could be used against you, and be aware. We can't search her for recording devices, so assume she may be recording the conversation." "Understood," I replied. I was ushered into a small, private meeting room where Lydia was already seated. I braced myself for the same arrogant, confrontational woman who had orchestrated a weekend of betrayal and intimidation, but the Lydia before me was different, shattered, vulnerable. The sight of her, the way she avoided my gaze, fiddling with her hands, triggered a brief surge of compassion in me, but it was fleeting. The memory of her questionable interactions with Langford over that weekend reasserted itself, cutting through any softness I might have felt. "Thank you for agreeing to meet Ethan," she began, her voice trembling. "What could you possibly want to say to me after all you've endured?" "Lydia," I said flatly, keeping my tone neutral. Tears began streaming down her face. "I am so ashamed of my actions. You didn't deserve any of that. I was completely ensnared by Victor Langford's influence. When I realized what was happening, and especially when I learned that the charges against you were dropped and that he and I could face accusations, it jolted me awake. I can finally face myself in the mirror." For the next 45 minutes, she spoke in a stream of reflection, analyzing her behavior and motivations. She didn't probe for information. She didn't interrogate me. She didn't attempt to justify her actions. "I understand it's over between us, Ethan. If I were in your position, I'd do the same. I want a divorce. I don't blame you. I've resigned from my job and made it clear to Victor Langford that I never want to speak to him again." Her words hung in the room, heavy but honest. I remained silent, absorbing them. The damage had been done, the trust irreparably broken, but at least, finally, the chaos was drawing toward resolution. Once again, I found myself back at my parents' house, the weight of the past few weeks pressing down on me like a physical force. The drive over had been quiet, the radio off, my thoughts racing through every confrontation, every betrayal, every threat. When I finally crossed the threshold, the atmosphere hit me immediately, heavy, tense, and devoid of warmth. My parents were furious, their anger palpable in the stiff posture of my father and the tight lines of my mother's face. Let's just say any pretense of a welcoming home was gone. The air was thick with disappointment and frustration, and every glance felt like an accusation. I stood there in the living room, silent, letting their fury wash over me. There was no clever response, no witty remark. No shield I could raise to mitigate the storm. Lydia had created this mess entirely on her own, weaving a web of decisions that had consequences she could no longer avoid. And now I was left to contend with the aftermath, the fallout that stretched into months and perhaps even years ahead. "I'm uncertain about what life has in store for me," Lydia's words echoed in my mind, though we were not together at that moment. A part of me still remembered the softer tones of her voice, the moments when our connection had seemed unbreakable. Yet the harsh reality was undeniable. The chance of reconciliation was slim, almost non-existent. "My only hope," she had said, "is that eventually, after everything settles, we might have the chance to be friends." I let out a slow breath, gazing at her in silence. "That's a distant prospect, Lydia." "Very distant," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "We'll see when we get there. Best of luck." I stood up and exited the room, the finality of my words hanging in the air. A small part of me still held affection for her, a residual ember from years of shared memories, laughter, and love. But the possibility of reconciliation was gone. Revenge, too, no longer held any appeal. Circumstances had already reshaped her life. She had learned her lesson, and there was no need for me to add further retribution. Lydia had secured a plea bargain by fully cooperating with the authorities against Victor Langford. Her compliance led her to relocate to another city, and after that I lost touch with her entirely. When Langford's actions became public, 2 other men came forward with complaints against him, detailing blackmail and manipulation. The evidence, combined with the recordings of my interactions with him, was overwhelming. My testimony wasn't even required. The authorities had everything they needed. Langford was sentenced to 11 years in prison, a conviction that felt like the final, justified closure to a long and harrowing ordeal. After Langford's conviction, I pursued a civil case against him and the remnants of his law firm. The suit culminated in a $1.5 million settlement, a victory not just for justice, but for those who had supported me throughout the ordeal. A significant portion of the settlement went to Ryan, whose guidance, support, and ingenuity had been invaluable. Despite my initial indignation at the magnitude of the sum, I felt nothing but satisfaction in being able to reward him for his unwavering loyalty. With the storm behind me, my business began to flourish like never before. I was in the final stages of acquiring a specialized door manufacturer, expanding our operations, and integrating 6 employees who had become a second family. The sense of camaraderie, loyalty, and shared purpose within my workshop was more fulfilling than any financial gain. A few days after my divorce was finalized, Ryan and Charlotte invited me to a barbecue. It was there that I met Charlotte's sister, Olivia. We connected instantly, effortlessly, and what began as casual conversation quickly blossomed into a budding relationship. We had been dating for a few weeks, and though the future remained uncertain, it felt good to embrace life again. Several weeks after settling the civil case, I made the decision to visit Langford in prison. I instructed the guard to ensure he remained seated and attentive for our conversation. As he walked into the room, I smacked the table lightly to announce my presence, opening with a casual, cutting taunt. "What do you want, Langford?" I asked, the words dripping with irony. Langford attempted to rise to leave, but the guard held firm, insisting he stay. Ignoring his initial huffing and muttered threats, I leaned back casually. "Interesting," I continued. "I heard your wife, Ava, filed for divorce. Perhaps I should invite her to dinner, offer her a truly memorable night." His reaction was immediate. "You bastard," he roared, enraged. I cut him off with a grin, calm and measured. "Don't bother wasting a pathetic spit on me. I've already done that. That dove-shaped tattoo on her thigh, really, quite charming, isn't it?" I added, watching his face flush crimson as he struggled to maintain composure. For a moment, he teetered on the brink of another tirade, ready to unleash threats, but even he seemed to recognize the futility of the approach. I let him stew in silence. "I'm not here to discuss Ava," I said lightly, almost conversationally. "I'm here to remind you that you're a fool who meets reminders of his own foolishness every so often. Consider this a warning." A man in his own home, outlining in advance the consequences if he doesn't comply with absurd demands, that's hardly a display of intelligence. Even a carpenter would recognize that you're the one left in the dust this time. I laughed softly, watching his simmering anger boil over. "Weren't you the one who claimed that certain materials were illegal for a simple man like me, but perfectly acceptable for a powerful figure like yourself? Your sense of grandeur is truly overwhelming." "Perhaps it's the jumpsuit, it suits you quite well." Langford's face contorted with fury, his composure unraveling, but I wasn't done. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "I have something that both Ava and Lydia believed you might find enlightening one day," I said, placing it carefully in front of him. He unfolded it, scanning the page with rising confusion. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice tight with disbelief. "Case in point," I replied, a smile tugging at the corner of my lips. "This is a depiction of female anatomy," I continued, pointing to a particular area on the illustration. "They wanted you to know that this, right here, is the point of arousal." For a man who thrived on intimidation and control, I could see the realization dawn on him. His power wasn't absolute, not when faced with foresight, preparation, and the unexpected consequences of underestimating someone he deemed inferior.